Hey, we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Fantasy Authority Game Day Show. Of course, it's brought to you by thefantasyauthority.com. We have a lot of great articles over there. So if you haven't been over there in a while, go head over, check them out, and let us know what you think on Twitter at FF_authority. I am your host for today. My name is Anthony Pinzone. Alongside me, I will have Kevin Steele. He just took a step away to get some coffee. There has been some NFL action going on already. Game in London between the Redskins and the Cincinnati Bengals. Right now, the Bengals lead this game 13-10. If you're new to the show, let me just give you a little background. In today's show, we give you live fantasy football advice. This show is all about you. If you have questions, put them in the YouTube chat or go on over to Twitter and use hashtag AskTFA. We will make sure we get to your question during the show. We actually guarantee we will get to your question during the show. Even if it's a repeat, we do try to at least answer it again. We may not go in depth on a repeat question, but we will answer it again. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate having you guys here. If you enjoy the show, make sure you hit that thumbs up right there on YouTube. That helps us out a lot. That puts us higher in the search rankings when people come on YouTube and search fantasy football and things like that. So with all of the intro out of the way and, all that jazz, let's talk a little bit about this Bengals-Redskins game. Jeremy Hill has gone back to being pretty much irrelevant. He has 8 carries for 37 yards and a catch for -3 yards. Hill owners amongst the the saddest owners in the league, I guess you could say. He is getting the ball here in the red zone, though. He just took it down to the 7. So hey, maybe you'll be redeemed right here. Oh, now he just took it to the Washington 1. So it looks like I'm a little behind because I'm streaming it on PlayStation View. So I'm a little bit behind, a little bit. But yeah, did Jeremy Hill get in the carries and did he get in? No. Jeremy Hill owner still hopeful, still keeping the fingers crossed. Gio does have a touchdown already this game. It'd be nice to get the Hill owners a touchdown as well. And it didn't happen. Andy Dalton rushes the right side for a 1-yard touchdown. So Dalton's going to steal that touchdown. Then it'll be his second of the day. He now has a passing touchdown and a rushing touchdown, leaving Hill owners with nothing to write home about. So sorry, Hill owners. If you decided to start Kirk Cousins today, he has 200 yards and an interception, so that's not really working out too well. Kelly, the running back who's taking place for Matt Jones with Washington, he has 10 carries, 29 yards, and a touchdown, so at least the touchdown's helping you out a little bit. Jordan Reed, in his return from a concussion, has 5 for 45 with no score. Vernon Davis also getting involved in the action. He has 3 for 60, so both tight ends doing a pretty good job here. On the other side, Tyler Eifert, 663 and a touchdown. Welcome back, big guy. AJ Green has 5 for 55. Jamison Crowder, 5 for 43. Pierre Garçon, 3 for 35. And Deshaun Jackson, a minimal 2 for 10. If you're playing kicker still, Dustin Hopkins is 1 for 2 with a 20-yarder, so that's not much for you. And Mike Nugent just has a couple extra points. That's pretty much the rundown of this Redskins and Bengals game so far. I wouldn't say it's been a snoozer. It's actually been some pretty good football. Some of these London games have been pretty darn boring, including last week's matchup. But this one has been pretty good so far. Bengals take a 20-10 lead now. We'll see if Kirk Cousins and company can come back and respond to that. Looks like Kev is back with his coffee. How you doing today, Kev?
Oh, not bad. Yeah.
Pretty good, man. Just giving everybody a rundown of the Redskins-Bengals game in case they are not in front of a TV or in front of a computer or in front of a phone, or maybe they're on a mountain somewhere. I don't know how they're watching us then, but, whatever.
Yeah.
Hasn't been a bad game so far, though.
No, not terrible. I mean, the first half wasn't great for Cincinnati. I think Dalton only had like 50 yards passing in the first half, but overall, it's been bad. It's been pretty good.
Yeah, I was just watching the play-by-play here. Jeremy Hill almost got a touchdown. They gave it to him twice inside the red zone, or maybe 3 times inside the red zone. He couldn't punch it in, so then Andy Dalton just rushes around the the side and takes it in. Still in another tough game here for Jeremy Hill owners. He has 36 total yards and no score.
Yeah, not too bad of a game so far, but this week 8 slate of games is interesting. We're obviously have the 6 teams on bye, and there's a lot of running back injuries this week to deal with and to sort through and to try to navigate your way through. Because if you just go look through the rundown of injuries, what do you do with Lamar Miller, who now they're saying has a shoulder injury and he's expected to play, but now there's reports out there that he's on a snap count, and Alfred Blue could actually outtouch him this week. And then you have Devonta Freeman, who everything was pointing to, excellent news because Tevin Coleman was out. Now Devonta Freeman's dealing with a hip pointer. So many injuries.
Yeah, when I first got up this morning, started looking at the notes for today's show, and then starting adding to it, I'm like, holy cow! Not only are there 6 bye weeks, now there's all these running back injuries. You could be starting guys who you would never in your life think that you should be starting or would be starting. You're just taking some crazy chances today at the running back position.
Yeah, LaShawn McCoy's out, Jerick McKinnon's out, which is great news for Matt Asiata, and then LaShawn McCoy being out, which we talked about on Tuesday, just how terrible of a decision it was for Rex Ryan to even consider playing him last week, and then that blew up in his face. But now reports out of Buffalo, or they're going to go with a hot hand. So that's awesome, for people who probably picked up Mike Gillislee thinking that they could plug him in. And then Jamal Charles is still out. And then obviously the C.J. Anderson news, which whenever we recorded the podcast on Tuesday night, that news wasn't out yet that C.J. Anderson was going to be done for the season. So, obviously people who picked up and stashed Devontae Booker are thrilled, but I don't know. It's an interesting week with very, already down 6 teams, and then with the injuries, just makes it even worse. So you're right. I think there's going to be a lot of teams who are, contemplating playing a lot of players they never would have even expected.
One of those guys that people may be playing today is Rob Kelly for Washington, who's playing right now. He does have a touchdown already. He has not looked good at all, about 3 yards per carry. Has actually looked, what's the word for it? It's just kind of a little out of place. Like it's almost like it's too big for him almost. He just a little wide-eyed rookie, if you want to call it. But he did get the touchdown, so any owners who did take a shot on him, at least he got that.
Yeah, and you may, that's basically what you best case scenario, I think, for him. So it's like when I was setting up my rankings this week and I was looking at the running backs, and like once you got down to like the flex tier of players, you're kind of like, really? Like these are the options that, like I have Peyton Barber at 35 and Kadeem Carey and Wendell Smallwood, and not like, there's no guys down there at the bottom that really just stood out to you as plays that really made sense. So I think you're pretty much just plug and play and just hope for the best, like, what you did with Fat Rob.
Yeah, Fat Rob. I'm looking at the options in one of my leagues here. It is so thin. You're looking at guys like Jalen Richard, Alfred Blue. Charkandrick West might be a decent play with Jamal Charles not going. Ronnie Hillman with Jerick McKinnon out. But Asiata, you figure, is probably going to get the bulk there. Capri Bibbs, if you really want to dig deep, he's the backup to Booker there in Denver. You're really digging deep this week if you need a running back option. Niall Davis is still available in this league too. Only owned in 29% of leagues on Yahoo.
That's surprising, yeah. I think I would pick up Niall Davis. The Green Bay situation is interesting because Randall Cobb is out this week, which was a late night, announcement. I was up at like 1 a.m. last night, and then Adam Schefter broke the news. I'm like, so I think that spells great things for, Ty Montgomery, especially now that you can plug him in at running back. But and at least on ESPN, I'm not sure if they actually made the switch on Yahoo yet, but I know in ESPN leagues you can use him as a running back, wide receiver, and then obviously Devontae Adams, I think it really helps him out. I think he's a really viable wide receiver too this week. And I don't really know what to make of Jordy Nelson. He's likely going to be matched up with Trufant in Atlanta, who is an elite corner. But I mean, and not to mention the fact that Jordy Nelson hasn't looked good at all the last, I don't know, 3 or 4. I mean, really the last couple of weeks, he hasn't just. I don't know if the knee injury is catching up to him or what, but I mean, he's kind of fallen off the cliff there. So, I mean, dare I say, with 6 teams on by and everything that's going on, that Jeff Janis could actually be a legitimate option there as a deep threat against Atlanta, who does struggle to stop the pass?
No.
I mean, you have Randall Cobb out, Jordy Nelson, like I said, and then I mean he should be their wide receiver 3 today. So I don't know. Like he's a very interesting option there in a week, like I said, where you're really short on options.
If anything, I could see them kind of sliding Montgomery back out to receiver and playing Davis. I mean, I think that it definitely increases the Montgomery hype for this week for sure. Jeff Janis,
touchdown.
They don't like Janis for whatever reason. They're not fans of Jeff Janis.
I don't really get it, to be honest. I mean, I'm not there. Obviously, I don't know what all goes on and everything else. But I mean, we saw him in the playoff game. I mean, he was their only option last year. He just exploded last year against the Cardinals. And I mean, I know he broke his hand and everything else. So the first part of the year, his hand was actually at a club, so it kind of made sense. But they've just never. That's the thing they're lacking is a deep threat. Like that's the difference when we talk about Green Bay. And we've kind of talked about this before with Green Bay. Is like, what's wrong with Aaron Rodgers? Like he's been good, but he just hasn't been the Aaron Rodgers that we've come to expect the last 2 or 3 seasons. And why is that? And that's the reason they haven't had the deep threat, and that's what people were excited about with getting Jordy Nelson back because he is their deep threat. But Jordy Nelson hasn't been doing that, and so like that's what I've never understood with not using Jeff Janis in that capacity, because that's exactly what Jeff Janis is an elite deep threat.
It just must not be that good or something. I mean, it's not like he's, especially in situations like this and it seems to have happened quite a bit lately where both Cobb and Nelson are kind of nursing some injuries here. Janis just never really steps in. He had maybe one good game when Aaron Rodgers was talking him up last year, and then from then on, it's just kaput. Whole lot of nothing. A bunch of. Let's go through the running back out list just to start. In case you're unaware, Doug Martin out, Jerick McKinnon out, LaShawn McCoy, Matt Jones, Jamal Charles all out. CJ Anderson done for the season, so Devontae Booker is the running back there. In Denver now, Capri Bibbs is the backup. We just mentioned that a second ago. Tevin Coleman, out. Lamar Miller is officially active, but there could be a chance he'll be on a snap count as he is nursing a shoulder injury. So keep an eye on that. For Miller owners, Alfred Blue is the backup there. The wide receiver position, the outlook is a little better. Dante Moncrief is expected to return, which is big news for any Moncrief owners, those of you who've been holding on to him, or if you managed to pick him up these past couple weeks. Michael Floyd will be a game-time decision. Des Bryant is expected to return. Let's see how that affects the Dallas offense. We've seen it in the past where these big receivers come back and they end up kind of wrecking the flow of the offense because now the quarterback feels like he has to get the ball to him. He feels obligated to throw it his way. So let's see if the Dallas Cowboys offense plays as well with Dez as they have been without. Cordell Patterson, which is a guy I've liked, talked about him on Tuesday. He will likely sit with a concussion. We don't have anything official on that yet, but we're keeping an eye out. And then, like you just mentioned, Kev, Randall Cobb is out. About that Cowboys situation, I kind of think the Cowboys are going to falter a little bit here. They have not faced a defense like Philadelphia yet. And Philadelphia kind of got back on track last week with that matchup versus Minnesota. I'd like for them to possibly dominate this game.
It's certainly interesting because, I mean, Dak Prescott has played well above anybody's expectations for the week. I don't think anybody foresaw this sort of output from him. But I don't know. It's tough to say because, I mean, with Ezekiel Elliott and as well as he's ran, and with getting Des Bryant back, and like I said, how well Dak Prescott has done. I mean, he's not forcing things. He's not trying to play above his head. He's basically, taking what's given to him by defenses. So you're right. I mean, but Philadelphia has played amazing. What happens when you get rid of Chip Kelly? All of a sudden, who knew how good this defense would be, and so I don't know. It's kind of an interesting game, in my opinion. So I don't know. Like, I think you still, depending on what your options are, I think you still would feel okay starting Dak Prescott. I think I have him at like QB 17 this week, so obviously I don't feel fantastic about him, but I think he is serviceable in a week where you're kind of limited on options. So I don't really know what to expect, though, from Des Bryant coming back from this injury. He really wasn't highly involved before he got hurt. I mean, he was there, but I mean, he wasn't like a huge difference maker. I mean, it was still Cole Beasley and Jason Witten getting all the looks. So I think that'll be another interesting thing to really monitor this week with getting him back. And then, of course, like what's your take on the Tony Romo sized elephant in the room? What do you think if he continues Dak Prescott on this trajectory? Do you bench Dak Prescott for Tony Romo when he comes back?
Gosh, man. I thought about this a lot because obviously it's been a huge, huge topic of conversation on sports radio everywhere, on sports anything everywhere. But how can you bench a guy when he has you where he has you? I mean, the Dallas Cowboys lead the division at 5-1. I mean, 2-1 at home, 3-0 on the road, 1-1 in the division. So that one division loss actually, that's pretty big, right? They're 5-1, but I'm sure they would love to have back that division loss and maybe trade it for a non-division loss there. But even so, in a division that wasn't expected to do much this year, they were kind of expected to be bottom of the barrel a little bit like they were last year. You now have 3 teams with 4 wins and the Dallas Cowboys leading the charge with 5 wins. So this game tonight is super important. I think if Dak wins this game tonight, there is no way you could bench him. You just can't. You just can't bench a guy who goes into Philly and beats Philly when this game could possibly determine who the winner of the division is. I mean, Romo is fantastic and all, but he has never won anything, right? And he's gotten to the playoffs, but what's his playoff record? I don't know. He's never gotten very far. I know that much. So I think
2-4 in the playoffs.
2-4 in the playoffs. Yeah, it may not be all on him, but come on. It's not like we're replacing Joe Montana here. We're replacing Tony Romo, who has been fantastic regular season quarterback, but he has not gotten the job done in the playoffs. So why not stick with Dak? If he wins tonight, he has you at 6-1 at almost the halfway point. He has you in terrific position to get into the playoffs. Why not just, stick with the future and see what you can get for Tony?
I agree. If it was me, and I was Jason Garrett, I would stick with Dak Prescott. I think he has done well. Like, you don't want to mess that chemistry up because what happens then? Like, do you have then the gravitas, I guess, to then if you did turn to Tony Romo and let's say Tony Romo struggled, do you have that in you to come back and then bench Tony Romo for Dak Prescott? Like, why not stick with what's working to this point? And I think that's exactly the road I would go. I mean, the Cowboys have the best offensive line in the league. They have Ezekiel Elliott. Like, everything is clicking for them right now. I don't think I would mess with it despite how good Tony Romo is. And I mean, Tony Romo's always, one hit away from being injured anyways. But you're right. Like, he's never been great in the playoffs. He's killed that team on multiple occasions in the playoffs. So like, I don't think I would sit Dak in favor of Tony Romo just because, because I think that's the only thing we're really talking about. And with Tony Romo is more of a legacy, if you will, of a guy who once was. Because I mean, he hasn't done anything the past few seasons obviously he's been hurt that entire time. So I guess that's not really fair, but I don't know. Like, there's no way I would turn back to Tony Romo. Because, I mean, if you do, and then if Tony Romo fails, every Dallas Cowboy fan is going to be at the gates with torches and axes ready to to tear down the place because of it.
I mean, the whole conversation may be a moot point, anyways, right? Because look at how hard of a hit, quote unquote, he took to put him out for this long. I mean, he's been out for what, 8 games now, and it was not a hard hit. It was in the preseason. He got landed on, and he pretty much broke his back. I mean, the guy is very fragile. I honestly am shocked he didn't retire. Given that the number of neck and back injuries he's had, the guy's going to barely be able to walk, and he's only like 37 or something like that. Like you said, though, he hasn't done much lately, but it has been because of injury. In 2014, he had a pretty good year, 34 touchdowns, 9 interceptions with 3,700 yards. And they say you can't lose your job to injury, but has anybody said that to Drew Bledsoe lately?
So true.
I think they got to stick with. I mean, it's hard. I see the predicament they're in, right? Because just look at Tony's stats the 2 years he was healthy: 2013, 2014, 3,800, 3,700 yards, and 31 touchdowns, 34 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions, 9 interceptions. I mean, he's fantastic, playing great, phenomenal football. So I'm sure they're looking at that and like, man, we have an unknown in Prescott that's playing really well, but we know that Tony can do 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns. Aren't we obligated to put him in?
Yeah, no, but then at the same time, I mean, like I mentioned, like he's been like a poor man's Peyton Manning, Tony Romo in his career, right? Like he's a terrific regular season guy, but when the playoffs get here, he always seems to kind of poop his pants, right? Like I mean, it never works out, and so like I mean, how much longer can you continue to go that? And then now you have the unknown in Dak Prescott. Now, of course, Dak Prescott is a rookie, and he can start to show that. And if he does, then then it makes the decision a little bit easier. But until that time comes, if he continues to play at this high of a level, I think you just have to stick with him. But
yeah, I agree. What's your pup whining about back there? He wants some food?
Yeah, I don't know. Who knows?
Who knows? So South Rules is joining us. What's up, South Rules, man? Nice to have you. He's got a couple questions. Ty Montgomery or Jordy Nelson. We just talked a little bit about that. Also, Matt Asiata or Mark Ingram or James White. So let's stick with the receiver first. If you had to pick between Montgomery and Nelson, which one are you going with?
I think you got to go. I think you got to go Jordy Nelson, just because of the upside. No Randall Cobb. I don't love it because you see how Green Bay has been getting the ball to Ty Montgomery out of the backfield and how effective he's been, and especially I guess he doesn't say if it's a PPR or not. So that's very interesting. But I think you have to play the high upside guy in Jordy Nelson. And then for the running backs, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but Mark Ingram has not been good at all this year. And I think he only has 1 touchdown on the season. And then with James White, obviously, very intriguing. But I'm actually going to go with Matt Asiata, who we know is going to get the being touchdowns and non-PPR. So either way, I mean, he's going to see 18 to 20 touches tonight or on Monday against the Bears. The Bears have been better than what most people thought they would be, but I'll roll with Matt Asiata and that touchdown upside he has because like I said, Mark Ingram is going against, despite being at home, a very tough matchup against Seattle. Seattle's very great against the run. And then you also have James White, who I like LeGarrette Blount more this week. I think this is going to be another LeGarrette Blount week. I think you see the Patriots get up early, and then as we've seen, the Patriots will turn to LeGarrette Blount and let him, So I don't feel great about James White. Wouldn't be surprised if he did find the end zone because they have been looking for him in the passing game. But there's just too many options there. I would stick with the guy that I know is going to get the most work, and that's Matt Asiata.
Ooh, Andy Dalton just throws an interception to a linebacker. They're only up 2017. It's the fourth quarter. What are you doing, Dalton? I agree with it being a LeGarrette Blount week here for New England. Once again, I think Jay Ajayi very much exposed the Buffalo linebacker core last last week. The Buffalo's linebacking core was considered to be one of the strongest points of their defense. It turns out it's the front four, right? If the front four were stopping the run, and if the front four don't stop the run, like was the case last week, the linebackers had very little to say about it. Ajayi was constantly ripping them for 10, 14, 15 yards a pop. I think LeGarrette Blount is a very similar runner, and he's going to probably do the same exact thing. Mark Ingram in PPR leagues hasn't been horrible, but he's been inconsistent for sure. I do have him, I believe, as a dud this week going against Seattle. I just think that Seattle's defense at home against a New Orleans team that does not play well on the road is not a good start there. So I would agree with Matt Asiata.
Sure. The game's in New Orleans.
Isn't this in Seattle?
No.
My apologies. I thought this game was in Seattle. Oh, geez. You're right. You're right. It's New Orleans. So that changes a little bit, but not enough for me to consider Mark Ingram over Asiata. I think he's a touchdown machine, this guy, right? I mean, when they're in the red zone, he gets the ball, so why not go with that? And Ingram hasn't been that great. So, yeah, I agree with that. The receiver situation is really tough, man. Really tough. Like, I want to go Montgomery there. I do. But with it not being a PPR and all that, I think I stick with Nelson. I think he's more likely to get a touchdown than Montgomery. Gosh, yeah. I don't feel good about saying that, though.
Well, I don't either, especially we've seen how well Ty Montgomery has played the last couple of weeks. So, and then you also have the Jordy Nelson not, really producing anything. But I don't know. I think if you look at Jordy Nelson, I feel like he has a much higher, he's much more his touchdown potential is much higher than what Ty Montgomery is. And if like you mentioned, if Niall Davis is more involved, especially in the red zone, I think that hurts Ty Montgomery as well. So I think you got to go Jordy Nelson, go with the guy who probably has the highest upside, and without Randall Cobb is going to see more targets.
So a couple of weeks ago, we talked about on the Tuesday show not starting a guy just because of his name. Are we getting lost in our own sauce here with this Jordy Nelson over Ty Montgomery?
No, I don't think so. I mean, at least not for me. I do agree with what you're saying, but this is just such a great matchup for Green Bay, indoors, in a dome. So I don't feel like fantastic about Jordy Nelson, but I see when you lose Randall Cobb, who receives the amount of targets that he does, and Devontae Adams has been playing very well. I just feel like that this is a week that you're going to see him get kind of back involved into the offense. And so, like I said, it's close because I have Ty Montgomery as a wide receiver too. And then I have, Jordy Nelson. Let me see where I got him. Okay, so he has I have Jordy Nelson as a high-end wide receiver too at 13th. And then I have Devonta Adams at 23, and then Ty Montgomery. Where the hell do I have Ty Montgomery? I don't even know. I don't see him.
I can't find him. I lost Ty Montgomery. He's gone. I'm sure, too, that...
21. Sorry, excuse me. I have Ty Montgomery at 21, and then, so I have Ty Montgomery as a low-end wide receiver, too.
You think Jordy went to Aaron after last Thursday's game was like, can I talk to you for a second? You got 3 different receivers, 10-plus catches, and I only got 1. We have a problem? You want to talk about it? He had 1 catch, 9 yards, in a day where Rodgers completed 35, 40 passes. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I think, what did he have last week? So... he got the same amount of targets as Jeff Janis. Jeff Janis had 3 targets, and Jordy Nelson also had 3 targets, while Devonta Adams had 16 targets, and Randall Cobb had 14 targets.
That's crazy. I would definitely expect Nelson to bounce back. I feel like quarterbacks do that. If they don't get their main guy a decent workload one game, they typically would come back to him the next game. And like you said, the matchup is just too good to be true. Thanks for joining us, South Rules, man. If you have any more questions, just come on back and feel free to shoot them our way. Those listening, you can also use hashtag AskTFA today or all week long to get your fantasy questions answered. If you need lineup advice, any of that, we are constantly paying attention to hashtag AskTFA and answering questions there all week long. Big play here. Oh, did he get it? He's celebrating, but there's no signal yet. Touchdown, Jamison Crowder. Kirk Cousins to Jamison Crowder. Wow. I started Pierre Garçon and, could use a little love there. Jamison Crowder getting all the love. But my opponent has Jamison Crowder on the bench, though, and Rob Kelly on the bench. So I'm feeling really good because he's leaving 30 points on the bench right now. Feeling really good about that one. What's this Ty Montgomery questionable label here? He has an
he's expected to play.
I always think about that during football season. Like, what happens when one of these guys gets sick? Like, I know how miserable it is to go to work with like the flu or with a cold or something like that. These guys are out there playing football with that. Oh my goodness, I can't even imagine. It's brutal. All right. How about the tight ends? Eric Ebron expected to play. Jordan Reed is playing and playing very well. Jordan Reed, Vernon Davis both playing very well for Washington. Tyler Eifert also playing very well for Cincinnati. That's big news there. Eifert coming back. This is his second game back, if I remember correctly.
Yes. Came back last week, only played 15 snaps.
Yeah, he was pretty well limited there. Josh McCown returning to the Browns, man. I think that is huge news for Terrell Pryor. What do you think?
Sure, and I think it's also really big news for their Barnkowski there. We know their connection, and that Gary Barnes just kind of flown under the radar a little bit, especially more so in PPR formats. And he's not a guy that many people talk about, but he's been pretty consistent. I know he scored double-digit fantasy points in at least 3 weeks so far this season. And then with Josh McCown back and that chemistry that them two have together, I think he's a legitimate tight end one this week. And so, you're rolling him out.
Oh, yeah, he has been so undervalued. It's been crazy. I've been trying to get my hands on him, but people in my leagues are too damn smart. There's some dumb leagues. Anybody have a dumb league I can join?
So many out there. You'd be surprised how many.
Yeah, you know what? This year I didn't do a public league, and usually that's where you get the dumb leagues right there, the public leagues. You get people starting Ted Ginn Jr. the whole year and stuff like that.
Yeah, so in my keeper league that I'm in, a guy he had Devontae Booker, but his wide receivers are so trash. Like he has Odell Beckham, and then he's starting like Michael Floyd and a bunch of other just scrubs that he's starting this week. And so he sent out a message in our we got a little Facebook group set up for our league, and sent out this message saying, hey, I'm loaded with all these RB1s. And so I go and look at his roster, and yeah, he's got Devontae Booker and then Melvin Gordon. He's got Jay Ajayi and Terrence West. I'm like, I don't know if you have like legitimate RB1s, but you have I think solid RB2s anyway. So I was like, I really wanted Devontae Booker more so because it's a keeper league, and I kind of like his long-term prospects. And so I sent him a trade, Kelvin Benjamin for Devontae Booker, which I feel like I was overpaying big time for a guy who's only has one good game in his career. And he's like, no, I want a legitimate wide receiver one. And I'm like, I'm loaded, that team. I have Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, Allen Robinson, who obviously has failed or struggled, and then Kelvin Benjamin, and then I have Dante Moncrief on the bench. So that's the reason I made the move. I was like, well, I got Moncrief coming back. I really like him. I could make that move. He sent me back a message. Well, what about Antonio Brown? I laughed. I'm like, you can't be that stupid. Like, really? Antonio Brown for Devontae Booker. Yeah, sounds like a fair deal. Okay. And so I told him, I was like, well, we could probably work something out because it is a keeper league that maybe because he has Odell. And I was like, well, I could offer, if I could offer a little bit more if you throw in Odell Beckham, because I know that Odell for Antonio Brown right now is not really a fair trade. I don't think it's a huge gap between the two, but I do like obviously Odell long term because obviously Odell Beckham Jr. is like 5 years younger than Antonio Brown. So that's the reason I kind of considered it. And he's like, no, that's not going to work. And I'm like, well, then you're a fool, because there's no way anybody could be that stupid to trade you like a legitimate top end wide receiver one for any running back that you have.
I don't understand. Like, the recency bias that goes towards these players is so real.
I know.
And the naming bias too, by the way. If they have a good name or they had a good week last week, don't even bother, because you're not getting them. Not for a fair price, at least.
No. What would you do with Jai, speaking of which?
Gosh, man, I don't know. I feel like I get that question a lot too from people in my life and around me who play fantasy football. I just don't know. I'd like to think he keeps going with it. I'd like to think that, but
I think he will, though, because if you look at it, I can't remember where I read this at, but so I think it's over their last 6 or 7 games. Like, as they're starting offensive line with Jawan James, Mike Pouncey, Brandon Albert. They've averaged 156 rushing yards a game, and he's exploded these last 2 weeks because they finally got their offensive line back together. And so, like, I like Jai, but I think this is also more of a product of their offensive line, and I don't think this is going anywhere. And so, as long as that offensive line stays healthy, I think that spells. I honestly believe you could take Jai out, and I think you would still see the same. Not 200 yards a game like he's been, but like Damian Williams, I think would be fine behind this offensive line as well. So, like, this is all contingent on that offensive line staying healthy, which, as we know, that really hasn't been a huge sticking point for the offensive line, because they seem to all get hurt. And so, I don't know. Like, I think I would, because I don't think Jai's value would be any higher than it possibly can be right now. And so, if I own him, and obviously, he's not going to get hurt, he's on bye, like, maybe I would look to trade him at his very highest peak value. Because if anything happens in the offensive line, like we saw before these last 2 weeks, just how bad things can be. But because basically it has less to do with the running back and far more to do with that offensive line. That offensive line, I was looking on like some advanced metrics and stuff. Before they came back, they were ranked 29th in the league. They are already through 2 weeks 12th. That offensive line run blocking. They run 4 tackles on their offensive line, and then Mike Pouncey at center. They are perfectly set up to be a road grading, mauling group who are just destroying teams. They're not really they're not elite at pass blocking, but they are at their run blocking schemes. And so for that, like, I think if I own Jai and I didn't trade him, I would be picking up Damian Williams as soon as possible, because he could be the next guy if something happened to Jai, who has been, nicked up throughout his first couple, years there. And also we know the bone on bone that he's got going on there in that knee. So if you can't get something that you like for Jai, I would obviously hold on to him, and then damn sure make sure that I pick up Damian Williams.
Yeah, man, you said it though. I mean, the health of that offensive line has hardly been dependable. That's for sure. But there are 4 first-round picks on that line. The left tackle, Brandon Albert. Then we got Laramie Tunsil, which was this year's first-round pick at left guard. Mike Pouncey at center. I have no idea who the right guard is. And then Jawan James at right tackle, which was the first-round pick 2 years ago. So they damn well better be playing well at this point, because I don't know another team in the league that has 4 first-round picks on their offensive line. It's good to see them finally gelling. But I agree. Here's the problem with trading guys after 2 big games. Everybody else sees that they've had 2 big games. So you really kind of have to find somebody who's fallen in love with him, right? You got to find that Jay Ajayi fan in your league. And if that person doesn't exist, well, then you kind of just have to roll with them. Because I really don't think you should just try to sell him just for the case of selling him. I think he is going to have a good year. But it'll also be hard to find somebody, I think.
Let's say that you're okay. So let's say, for example, because obviously you didn't pick up Jai with ever the thought of starting him, so he was obviously started on your bench. And let's say, which is very possible. Let's say you drafted David Johnson, DeMarco Murray, who was like a 4th round pick, and let's say you're just loaded at running back, right? But then you're really hurting at wide receiver. Like, it didn't make sense because, like, if you're never going to start him anyways, maybe he's just a flex consideration on a weekly basis, which he's been fine. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's been terrific. Then I see the why you would want to do it and why you'd want to make that move, because obviously you're improving an area of weakness to do so. Because, like I said, like, he was never a guy that you drafted as a starter. Most people picked him up off waivers, and now is a good time to be cashing in on the extreme value that he's at, because I don't think he's going to get any more valuable than he is. I mean, the man's rushed for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns the last 2 weeks. So with recency bias, people see that, especially for, I mean, we have had some running back injuries, right? Like, I mean, you easily could have been on the other side of that as well, where maybe an owner that drafted Adrian Peterson and Jeremy Hill touchdown. Yeah. So anyway, so I see both sides of it. I don't like necessarily trading running backs because we know how volatile the position is and how quickly injuries can mount up. And so keeping as many running backs as you can for that sake is probably a smart move, because you could easily, your top 2 studs could easily go down at any moment. And then you're kicking yourself that you traded J.H.I. Or on the flip side, J.H.I. could go out next week, get hurt, and then you're just kicking yourself, which I don't like playing that game of, well, if he gets hurt, but it's a real possibility. And plus, is this for real? Like I mentioned, like, I know the offensive line, or like I mentioned, nothing could happen to J.H.I. He could stay healthy. Oh, but their offensive line, a couple of their pieces on the offensive line gets hurt, and then they're back to, really struggling like they were.
Oh, sure. I'm hoping that they stay healthy. They cut 3 linemen after that debacle. Right, I forget if that was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, right before Ajayi started blowing up. 3 linemen, they just flat out cut them. I like this Gay's style of coaching here. Just to go back to this Bengals-Redskins game for a second, which is a freaking awesome, turned into an awesome game suddenly, right? I mean, this back and forth, back and forth. Did you see the play to A.J. Green with Josh?
No, I didn't know.
Josh Norman is hanging from his jersey before he even catches it, and there's no flag, and Green still caught it somehow. I have no idea how. He's carrying another human being on his back and catches the ball. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. So just to look at, I like to look at and match up the points scored here. So Jay Ajayi has about 94 points in this half PPR format that I'm looking at. So other players around him would be Michael Thomas in New Orleans, receiver-wise, Tyrell Williams in San Diego, Jamison Crowder, but he's a game ahead at this point, Randall Cobb, DeAndre Hopkins, Kelvin Benjamin, and then you kind of, Devontae Adams, Cole Beasley around there. What are you looking for in return if you're an Ajayi owner trying to get rid of him because, you're stacked at the position you need help at receiver? Doug Baldwin?
I mean, I don't know. I guess it just really let me see. Let me pull something up here.
It's tough. I very rarely trade in fantasy football, and this is for this very reason. Like, I almost never think I'm getting the value back that I want. As you called me on Tuesday, I'm one of those. But you know what? It doesn't make sense to me to trade if I'm not getting any value back, at least not value that I think I should get. So,
well, I mean, I think I would target like some wide receiver 2s, right? Like if a team has like honestly, like I really like Tyrell Williams. I wouldn't trade J.J. for Tyrell Williams straight. Like I'm gonna have to get a little bit more in return. But like if you get a Tyrell Williams who has a fantastic schedule the last 4 weeks of the season, and let's say like a Michael Thomas or something like that, or if you could go a little further up the scale of obviously, maybe a Marvin Jones or a Michael Crabtree, something in that range, or a Brandon Cooks, I would feel fantastic about. And it really depends on, if there's a team that went 0 RB, for example, who went wide receiver heavy, but has, and failed at the running back position and desperately needs it, and they're loaded at wide receiver. I mean, you could really, really benefit and help yourself. It's hard for me to say without just, I don't want to, I could sit here and just throw out names all day, but it really just depends on what you could possibly get for the guy. Because another guy I really sort of like is DeAndre Hopkins, as sort of a buy low, because I don't think it's going to cost you a ton to get him. Now, I'm going to sit here and tell you right now that I don't think that he's going to return back to the guy we saw last season. I mean, I just don't think that's in the cards for him, especially with Brock Osweiler. But I still think he's going to provide some decent weeks, and another guy that you could probably get for cheap. And their schedule moving forward is pretty tasty.
Yeah, man. I don't know if you saw in that. I don't know how much attention you pay to the listeners PPR league that we have going here. I think you pay pretty good attention. You're got a pretty good team this year, but somebody dropped Hunter Henry. I don't know who it was, but I swooped in. Now I got Gronkowski and Hunter Henry. Matt's meatheads dropped him. Yeah. What a situation that puts me in. Do you want Hunter Henry? You want to trade for Hunter Henry?
Can we? I don't remember. Can we start?
Yeah, we have a flex spot, but
can you start a tight end in the flex? I mean,
yeah.
I set the league up, and I don't even remember. That's great.
The problem is I have David Johnson, Mark Ingram, Latavius Murray, so all three of them are starting. Ingram versus Seattle kind of sucks, but Henry doesn't look like Henry's playing this week, so doesn't matter. Anyways, I do have a question here on Twitter from Bill Crandall. He needs to start. It's a half-point PPR, Gillislee or Ryan Matthews, and then there's a receiver question too. I'll get to after this one.
Oh man, I just don't know what to do with Ryan Matthews anymore. He just doesn't get the workload that we all thought he was. His workload has gone down. The Cowboys have actually been pretty solid against the run. Have actually been a pretty solid unit as a whole. And so, but then the Gillislee thing, like I mentioned, like there's reports that they could go with the hot hand. And now, do I expect Reggie Bush is going to become the hot hand? Or they also have rookie Jonathan Williams there as well. So you're running the risk with Mike Gillislee, although Mike Gillislee has looked great so far this season, even though last week, for whatever reason, they did whenever I guess, I mean, they were down quite a bit. But I don't know. Like, I think that's really tough. If it was me, I think I would go with Gillislee. Which I hate saying because I can see the scenario where Ryan Matthews does well. I think it's really a coin flip. It's really not. It's pretty close. So I know I'm not really helping anybody out by saying this, but you could really go either way, and I don't think I would fault you for it, just because I don't think either one stands out to me as a great matchup. None of them are the bell cow or going to really lead the team and carries, unless unless the guy gets hot, which is basically what you're going to have to hope for from either one of them. So if I'm being honest, I think the safe pick is probably Ryan Matthews, and probably the more upside play is probably Mike Gillislee.
Yeah, I was going to go with Matthews here as well, just because the Gillislee injury, and we don't know what's going to happen. There could be a timeshare, yada, yada, yada. Who the hell knows what's going to happen there? I do like Gillislee as a runner a little bit better than Matthews, but what is going on in Philly? Why is Wendell Smallwood getting the ball? So, I remember talking about this guy during the draft shows as some guy who would be lucky to make a team. Here we are in week 8. He's getting more production than Ryan Matthews is.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting year. I mean, we've already talked about that so many times. So, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if Ryan Matthews is nursing injuries that we don't know about, because his snap shares went down and then it sort of leveled out, but it's not at a point where you feel great about it. So it's more of just a complete committee there. I mean, Darren Sproles is also involved in the offense and the passing game as well. So you just don't feel great about Ryan Matthews at all.
Yeah. No, you don't. I do have him starting in a league, though. That's the way it goes. The next question, Cole Beasley or Devontae Adams?
I don't even know what to do. Devontae Adams.
Adams without question. So we have another question. This one coming from Dan K. at Uptech 2003. He says, DeAndre Hopkins or Michael Crabtree? Ooh.
It's got to be. It's DeAndre Hopkins. It's close because Michael Crabtree has played well, and they're facing a defense does struggle to get through the air. But I really like DeAndre Hopkins actually this week. Darius Slay, who is probably a top 20 corner in the league, is out this week for the Lions. They have multiple injuries among that offensive front. Like I sort of mentioned with DeAndre Hopkins, he has tons of favorable matchups moving forward. He is seeing, a decent, a solid amount of targets. I think he is sixth in the league in targets with 65. He just hasn't gotten the yards that we expect. He's only at 390 yards. He is getting in only 3 touchdowns so far this season. But I think this is a terrific matchup against a Lions defense who really can't stop anybody through the air. And so I love DeAndre Hopkins this week. I think he's a rock solid wide receiver 1.
I really, 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 really want to say Crabtree right here. I really do. But here's why I'm going to say Hopkins. Houston Texans are 4-0 at home. Brock Osweiler plays a lot better at home. And they're playing the Detroit Lions defense, which is absolutely atrocious. Oh, yeah, and Hopkins top 10 in targets this year. So I think if you combine it all together, Hopkins has not been as good as you were hoping this year, but I'm still sticking with DeAndre Hopkins in this particular matchup.
Speaking of that game, I think it's very interesting as a whole because, it's sort of a tale of two different – like there's legitimate case you could make that Matt Stafford is an MVP candidate this year as well as he's played. What's that?
I said I've seen people talking about that on Twitter. It's an interesting conversation for sure.
Yeah, and then on the other end, you have the other end of the spectrum with Brock Osweiler, which is obviously, as we know, just been awful. For example, like Matt Stafford ranks second in the NFL in points per drive at 2.31, while Brock Osweiler is last at 0.97 for all starting quarterbacks. But as for the Lions, like we were just talking about, Detroit is allowing the most passing points per attempt at 5.97. Detroit is also allowing opposing passers to complete 74.2% of their passes, the highest rate in the league, the highest completion rate over the entire season of 71.2% by the 2011, which is the highest completion rate since 2011, 71.2 by the Colts. They're also allowing 41 yards per drive, the most in the league. Detroit has allowed the 10th most rushing yards in the league to opposing backfields as well, but ranked 27th in rushing points allowed to the running back since they are the only team that has yet to allow a rushing touchdown to a running back this season. So that's a little skewed. So obviously where you attack them is through the air. The problem is Brock Osweiler, right? And he's only completed 13 of 15 passes, which is 26%, 15 yards or further down the field, which is the lowest completion rate for all quarterbacks with at least 20 or more downfield passes. The guy's been awful, right? I mean, I don't know how else to explain it, but at the other end of the spectrum, look who they have, right? I mean, they're facing one of the best matchups they're going to see all year. So I love DeAndre Hopkins. I think he's going to get peppered with targets, and I actually really like Will Fuller and C.J. Fedorowicz for that matter as well. I think he's a low-end tight end 1. On the opposite side of the ball, as for the Detroit Lions, as we just mentioned, has been terrific, especially Matt Stafford. They've really sort of dialed down the passing a little bit. After they averaged 66 plays per game over the first 3 weeks, and as of over the last 4, they've only allowed 55, or they've only ran 55.3 plays, which is 30th in the league. So they've obviously a little bit more committed to the run. The problem is, I think with Matt Stafford, I'm curious what your opinion on him this week against the Texans is. The Texans' defense is allowing only 198 passing yards a game and have only allowed 5 total touchdowns through the air through the first 7 weeks. So, what do you think about Matt Stafford? How confident are you in him this week?
I like him. I still like him because if you look at the quarterbacks that Houston has faced. You're looking at Jay Cutler, Alex Smith, Jacoby Brissett, Mariota before he got hot, Sam Bradford. Andrew Luck's a good one. That was their first good one. They held him pretty well, 252 and a touchdown. And then Trevor Siemian. I don't think this defense has been challenged. I think the numbers are a bit skewed, like you said, similar to Detroit with the running defense there. And Stafford has just been – look at the numbers. He has 3 or more touchdowns in 4 games this year. That's crazy. I don't think maybe he gets 2 this week. If you want to say he's going to have a down week and he gets 2 touchdowns instead of 3 instead of 4, I can see that. but I still think he is going to be a fine option, well worth playing.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, I mean, obviously, like I just mentioned, it's an unfavorable, play or unfavorable matchup for Matt Stafford against the Houston pass defense that is strong, especially at home. Um, they get to the quarterback. They've had 43 quarterback hits on the season, and they've only permitted top 12 fantasy quarterback finishes in just 2 of 7 games this year. But like you mentioned, they've also haven't had to face elite level talent either. So I think the reliance, or how often the Stafford relies on the passing game and his efficiency so far does make him still a QB1, probably a low end QB1. Because I mean, if you look at how efficient he's been as a quarterback, so with quarterbacks with at least 100 attempts, only Tom Brady, Dak Prescott, and Drew Brees are completing a higher percentage of passes than Matt Stafford at 68%. And obviously, his 15-4 touchdown to interception ratio is it has been tremendous for him, because normally he's usually a guy that throws a little bit more interceptions. So I'm not. So what I guess the long explanation here is that I like Stafford, but I'm not. Depending on other options, like I could see myself sitting him. So like I'm actually in the same situation. I'm a Matthew Stafford owner. In one league, I'm sitting him for Jameis Winston.
He has had games where he struggled. At Chicago, October 2nd, he only scored 10 fantasy points. Just as a note, this is for fantasy leagues that reward 6 points for a touchdown. Tennessee, week 2, he scored less than 20, and then last week versus Washington, he also scored less than 20. So he has had down games, but I could definitely see that. Jameis Winston, riding that train.
I mean, you got to against the Raiders, right, at home with Mike Evans. I mean,
still skeptical, Winston, man. Still skeptical. He's so hot and cold, that guy. I mean, I guess you could say that about most of the quarterbacks in the league, but he scores 30 or 5.
That is true, and last week was another blow-up week for him. So I don't feel like I'm not just like, oh, this is easy decision, because I kind of went back and forth on it. But I actually picked up, like, as you know, I am not a proponent of picking up and holding 2 quarterbacks in a 1 quarterback league, but I just sort of looked at the schedules for both of them, and Jameis Winston was available a few weeks ago. And as we've talked about how fantastic the Buccaneers schedule is, and then I sort of matched it to Matt Stafford, and it really plays out very, very well for Jameis Winston in the weeks that his great matchups are. The Lions sort of have tough matchups. So it's just kind of like a no-brainer to me, especially in the playoffs with Jameis Winston getting the Saints week 14 and 16. So, and then Matt Stafford actually plays the Saints week 13. So my quarterbacks, if I make it that far, are going to be facing the Saints 3 out of the last 4 weeks.
That's a good situation to hold 2 quarterbacks in, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. And I think right now, I know we're still a little early. I think this is basically the halfway point in the fantasy season. But I think it's time to start looking at those things. It's really time to start paying attention to schedules. We have enough information now. I saw somewhere that after somebody did some research, and really after 6 weeks, I think is the most telltale on what we can really expect from players. Obviously, things change, but 6-week time span is really the way to go. Because obviously, at week 13, what happened in week 1 doesn't really matter, right? So. But yeah, I think it's that time of the year to really start being a forward thinker and start really trying to position yourself, if you're in a great spot, especially to make the playoffs. Then I think it's really smart to really just kind of like looking ahead instead of just this 1 week.
Oh, for sure. You got to look ahead, especially if you are in playoff contention. If you're in the top 4 of your league right now, start looking ahead, because you need to stay in that top 4. Or 6, whichever you run. Hey, I mentioned before that Osweiler plays a lot better at home. I just wanted to kind of get some stats to back myself up, because I just said that willy-nilly without actually knowing whether or not he plays better at home. And actually, he does. In leagues that reward 6 points for touchdowns, he has scored 21 points in 3 out of his 4 home games this year. He's thrown for 2 touchdowns in 3 out of the 4 games as well. So Osweiler, much better play at home than he is on the road. Good news for Hopkins this week.
Man, sorry. Jameson Crowder has looked damn good this game.
Yeah, I can't, so my PlayStation View here is all sorts of messing up right now, so I can't even watch the game. It just keeps reloading it over and over and over again, so.
Oh, well, the Redskins have the ball right like 21-yard line with about a minute and 20 left, and the Redskins are driving down by 3, so they could go potentially win the game here if they can punch it into the end zone.
Can you do me a favor? Can you call up Kirk Cousins, tell him to throw it to Pierre Garçon? I know you got.
I'll see what I can do.
Okay, hold on. I had another question. I got distracted.
Okay.
One more question. We have one more fan question for now. They do keep coming in throughout the show, but Asiata or Latavius Murray half-point PPR?
That's tough. So Latavius Murray, is that what you said?
Yeah.
And Asiata? Because we saw last week, right? Latavius Murray wasn't fantastic, but he did get 2 touchdowns. He's clearly the elite option there between Jalen Richard, DeAndre Washington, and Latavius Murray. He's going to get the workload, but as we mentioned, so is Asiata. I think in that situation, I'd actually go with Asiata over Latavius Murray, though, because the Bucs have been pretty solid against the run. And they're supposed to be getting a lot of their pieces back this week. This is probably going to be the most healthy the Bucs have been all season, outside of Doug Martin.
Yeah, the Bucs haven't allowed a 100-yard rusher yet, but they do let up a lot of touchdowns to the running back, so we could see another multi-touchdown performance for Murray.
Right. So, again, another really close one, but if it was me, I would probably go with Asiata, who has this a little bit better of a matchup. Looks like we also – did we answer this other question? Looks like we got another question on YouTube.
What? No, that just came through. Hey, Philip Studer, he's back. Welcome back, Philip. Yes, let me answer this one first. I was going to say Murray. I don't know. I can't trust Asiata. I don't know what it is. I would stick with Murray.
Come on, you were the Asiata supporter.
Asiata supporter, but my gosh, against Latavius Murray, you got 2 of my guys there, man. Man, I think I like Murray better. I don't even know who the heck who's. I always forget. Minnesota's playing Chicago in Chicago. Oakland playing Tampa in Tampa. Yeah, Monday Night Football, Minnesota, Chicago. Man, Chicago's a tough defense, ain't it? Haven't they been good? Yeah, 28th in points allowed to the running backs, 28th best. No, 5th best. Sorry. I don't know how to read this freaking Yahoo fantasy points against. The 5th best against running backs. I don't know. I'm sticking with Murray. Let's. Carson Wentz or Dak Prescott going against each other.
Oh, Dak.
Carson hasn't looked the same since after that bye week.
He's starting to show as he's a rookie. I think you feel fantastic about him, long term. But this week, I got to go Dak. Dak's been consistent. He hasn't been like a beast, but he's going to give you the consistent points. And plus, you combine that with his rushing ability, which Carson Wentz also in his own right has the ability to, get out of the pocket and scramble and get up the field. So, yeah, but I would go with Dak. I think I feel a little bit more confident in his ability. He's right now, looks like he's just right outside of a QB1 at QB13 so far on the season. So.
God, do I have to start either of them? Are there any other options? Jameis Winston available by chance?
Well, I don't know. You look at Dak, and like you said, it is somewhat of a difficult matchup. But, Dak has been solid. Like I said, he's right outside of a QB1. He only has 6 games so far under his belt because they did have the bye. 7 touchdowns, only 1 interception. He does have the 3 rushing touchdowns. So, that's also, plays a big part. So, on the season, he has 10 total touchdowns. So, I don't know. I don't think it's a terrible play.
It's not a terrible play. Typically, I just don't like this primetime matchup in Philly.
Isn't it in Dallas?
God, I gotta get this right. You're right. It's in Dallas. I,
What is wrong with you today, sir?
somebody teach me how to read these. Yes, it's in. Guy, why do I keep thinking it's in? If it were in Philly, I would really hate that matchup. But yeah, you're right. It's in Dallas.
I mean, and Dak Prescott also is. He's third in the league in terms of points per dropback at 0.55 points per dropback. So the dude's just been really efficient. And like I said, he's also getting it done on the ground for you with 3 touchdowns, which I think is tied with Cam Newton for most. Yeah, okay, it is tied with Cam Newton for most in the league as well. So I think you got to feel pretty good about that. And so I'd fire him up. I think he is sort of a borderline QB1 this week.
Fair enough. Philip comes back with, for long term, should I start Ivory or Murray? Chris Ivory or Latavius Murray for the rest of the season, I would assume. I would say Murray.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Ivory is droppable, to be honest with you. He's not. I mean, it really depends on who else is out there, but yeah, he's droppable in my opinion. I mean, he's not somebody you're like, oh, I have to keep a hold of him because he's going to blow up. The Jaguars are just a dumpster fire right now. Which, speaking of which, has there ever been a game so, like, if you just would have watched the game, you wouldn't have felt that great about it, but as a fantasy owner, like, it was a tremendous fantasy performance for Blake Bortles, right? Like, if you didn't watch the game, you just saw that, you're like, oh, man, Blake Bortles balled out on Thursday night against the Titans. I think he had, like, in my league, it was a 6-point touchdown. I think he had 35 fantasy points. Yeah, I mean, just monster performance. But then if you actually watch the game, you realize, no, it all came in garbage time. And obviously none of it came to Allen Robinson. But anyway, I'm just saying, like, that's just two ends of the spectrums.
Robinson did end up with double-digit fantasy points in PPR leagues, so there's that, at least, for fantasy owners in PPR leagues. I completely agree, though, and I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking the same exact thing. Like, if I didn't watch that game and I just woke up on Friday morning and looked at the stat line, I would have thought, man, the Jaguars' defense sucks with the offense playing that well. The offense was not playing that well. The Tennessee Titans won that game before halftime and then went into a sort of prevent mode just to save face there. It wasn't close. Tennessee dominated that one. How about Mariota, man?
Yeah, he's looked good.
Bouncing back from a terrible start. I mean, let's see what he had 270 yards and 2 touchdowns. The week before, 232 and 2 touchdowns. The week before, 284 and 3. And the week before that, 163 and 3. That's 10 touchdowns in the last 4 weeks. Phenomenal. Actually, let me see here. I'm gonna rank my Yahoo standings here based on the past 4 weeks quarterbacks. Let's see where he ranks. Last 4 weeks total fantasy points. Number 1. There it is. The top fantasy quarterback over the last 4 weeks. Of course, he is a game ahead. But he does have he's first ahead of Luck and Ryan, but Luck and Ryan obviously haven't played yet. But he only has about he'll be top 5, I would assume, after this, after Luck, Ryan, Bortles, and Breeze play. Or Bortles already played, Breeze plays, Brady plays. I would still assume that Mariota will be a top 5 quarterback over the last 4 weeks. He has been balling. So if he's available in your league somehow, Yahoo, he is 75% owned, so not a very good chance he's available. If he is, he may be worth a look-see. 12:43. We got about 17 more minutes, guys, left in the show before NFL Week 8. I don't know if it kicks off, but the bulk of the games kick off. We've had 2 games will be finished by the time the 1 o'clock games start, 1 o'clock here on the East Coast. Get all your questions in on YouTube, on Twitter. Get them in before the game start because it locks at like 1 o'clock. That's it. Roster's locked. That's it. Game over. Can't switch it. You are sticking with what you got. Let's take a look at these matchups here, Kev. What are these matchups today? 1 o'clock. New England, Buffalo, Arizona, Carolina, Jets, Cleveland. Do you think Cleveland gets their first win?
No. I wouldn't bet on that.
feel like it's a good chance against the Jets. A better chance than that they've. I mean, they haven't played terrible. Last week was bad against Cincinnati. Before that, I feel like it hasn't been that bad. I could be wrong.
No, I mean, it's in a decent spot, especially with McCown coming back. Like, McCown is clearly the best quarterback they have on that roster, but the problem is can they keep him healthy? And to this point, no. The answer to that is absolutely no. Can they keep their starting quarterback healthy? So, I don't know. Like, I see it, and I think it is a decent matchup, especially for Terrell Pryor. And like we already mentioned, Barnkowski and Duke Johnson. I think those are all guys that you could really fire up this week and feel okay about. But I don't know. Like, I think the Jets. I don't know. Unless you believe in the narrative of Ryan Fitzpatrick is just pissed off and wanting to shove it up the GM and the coaching staff and everybody else's what. Then I don't know. But I think this is a good matchup for the Jets. I think the Jets get the win, but I wouldn't be shocked if the Browns beat them.
Not me either. I'm actually hoping the Browns beat them because obviously I'm a Dolphins fan, so I don't want the Jets to win. I don't want any sort of comeback to happen here for the Jets that were 1-5 just a couple weeks ago. But how do you feel about KC and Indy today?
I think it's going to be a high-scoring affair. It's interesting because it always scares me whenever home team is the dog, especially one that has Andrew Luck on it. The Chiefs, I think, are going to do exactly what we've seen them do the last few weeks, and that's ground and pound. Spencer Ware has been an absolute monster so far, and so the Colts are absolutely horrendous, atrocious against stopping the run. So I think you would you love Spencer Ware there. I think he blows up. If it is a shootout, I think obviously the Chiefs are going to have to pass the ball a little bit more, and I think that really benefits Travis Kelce. And who knows what to do with Jeremy Maclin anymore? The guy's he's just not getting as involved. He's playing more of the slot this year than he has in the year before last. Like, stop. He's playing the slot far more than he did last year. Sometimes you gotta regroup real quick. But they like I mentioned the other day, like they just have so many options there now, far more than they did last year. Last year it was backs, and then it was Jeremy Maclin. Chris Conley wasn't a factor. Albert Wilson was involved, modestly, I guess. And then it was Travis Kelce. But Jeremy Maclin was peppered with targets. This year, their running game has done really well. And then we've seen Tyreek Hill kind of emerge as a, sort of a gadget player, but a guy they've really tried to get the ball to and through the pass. And he's also lined up at running back. Chris Conley has gotten a really fair share of targets, more than I thought he was going to get. So it's really hurt Jeremy Maclin. So, and then on the other side of the ball, I think this week, I love Andrew Luck. I think he's obviously a top 5 play. I don't feel great about Frank Gore. The Chiefs defense has gotten better and better each week and played well above what I actually anticipated. They really struggled the first part of the year, but kind of gotten things together. And nobody's talking about Marcus Peters, who looks like a top 5 corner in the NFL right now. Dude has become elite. And then obviously Justin Houston could be back as early as next week, which is monster for that defense. So regardless, Moncrief's back this week, though. So he's the guy that we haven't really talked about. Would you play Dante Moncrief? I mean, he's not coming off a knee injury or something like that, or a ligament. I mean, it was a broken bone. So I think that makes you feel a lot better. And like I said, I think he should still be he should still be healthy. I mean, or in shape, I should say, or football shape, even though he's been out since I think week 2, because he was still able to work out and things like that, and keep himself in shape. So would you play Dante Moncrief this week?
I would, and I am. I'm actually playing him over Michael Floyd at this point. That team has a lot of injury questions there, because I also have Cameron Meredith, who's questionable. Yay me, Monday night player who's questionable. But yeah, I would. I think he's desperately needed in Indy right now. I don't think they have the luxury of bringing him along slowly, so to speak. Ty has been playing lights out, been targeted more than any other player in the league right now, but he kind of needs some relief because that hasn't translated to wins. So I think, what are they right now? They're 3-4.
Mm-hmm.
If they're going to start picking up some wins and start making a push for that division, they need to get Moncrief in there sooner than later. What do you think about Meredith, by the way? I mean, are you starting Moncrief? We'll start with that first. But then after that, what about Meredith with Jay Cutler and being questionable Monday night? I'm struggling there. I'm tempted to put Floyd in over him, but with Floyd, how he's been, I don't even know.
Yeah, I'm definitely I'm starting Moncrief this week. I think he's a viable wide receiver 3. I know a lot of people, like I said, we're going to be scared away from him, and for rightfully so. I think sometimes guys who come back from injury are a little rusty and things of that nature. So I can see the argument with not starting him. It really depends on your options, but like we said, with so many teams on bye, injuries, everything else, I think he makes for a really logical play this week. I mean, as for Cameron Meredith, I was obviously on board that Cameron Meredith train. However, I mean, at least for this week, I'm not probably starting unless you're just desperate. But you just hope that the Bears can keep Jay Cutler healthy, because I think Jay Cutler provides their best chance of really all those, Cameron Meredith and Alshon Jeffrey to get any sort of, I just stay relevant. But the interesting thing is I think you're going to see it kind of flip, right? Like we saw Cameron Meredith, especially with Brian Hoyer, just peppered with targets. Well, I think you're going to see that flip back to Alshon Jeffrey, which is great for Alshon Jeffrey owners, because Alshon Jeffrey owners are sure pulling their hair out by this point, just because he just hasn't been getting the targets that we're accustomed to from him. So I still think Cameron Meredith can be fantasy viable, but I think now without Brian Hoyer, I think he's a little bit more shaky wide receiver 3 flex option, I think, to this point.
I sure wish I would have had the foresight to start Derrick Henry and DeMarco Murray.
Yeah, big-time performances from both of them. I mean,
obviously started Murray, but Derrick Henry sitting there on the bench with 17.7, and I'm struggling between Cameron Meredith or Michael Floyd, neither of which are likely to score 17.7. So, yay, go team. We do have some questions coming in from TN. Welcome back, TN, man. Good to have you back. He says, Tyler Eifert having a gate. I can speak English, I swear. He's having a great game right now. Of course, I put him on the bench and I'm playing Barnage instead. Is Eifert a must-start over Barnage going forward? Oof. Yes, but do you have a flex that you can put Barnage in? What do you think, Kev? Hello?
Okay.
I think you got to start Eifert over Barnage going forward, right? I mean, he's a Tyler Eifert. He's a touchdown magnet. But, gosh, what are you going to do with Bennett? Or Barnage, not Bennett. Sorry, Barnage.
I think it just really depends on matchup, I think, overall. I mean, on a week-to-week basis, you're just playing that. In my opinion.
God, you really don't think Eifert's a weekly start?
I mean, he is, but then if depending on the matchup, I mean, I can create a scenario where I would play Barnage as well.
He also picked up Niall Davis, and he has to play him this week. Our projections for Niall Davis. Oof, we've never been asked the projections question before. This is interesting. I'm curious to see what you come up with for this one.
It's tough because we don't really know how much of a usage he's getting. I think you could probably see 12 carries, 50 yards, and a touchdown.
I was going to say 50 yards. I don't know that he gets a score. I don't think so. I can see max potential 50 yards. We don't know how much he's going to play. Like last week, he was a huge pickup, right? And he didn't play at all. Maybe 1 or 2 snaps and didn't do anything. If you were listening to my studs and duds last week, though, you knew not to play him. Anyways, moving forward, we still don't know how much he's going to be involved. They are missing Randall Cobb, so we're assuming that he'll play a little bit more, but I still don't think he gets more than 50 yards. Possibly a score, but. And one more, Zach Ertz or Jimmy Graham. I hope this is a different league. I hope you don't have one team with Tyler Eifert, Gary Barnidge, Zach Ertz, and Jimmy Graham on it. Could you imagine that? It's Graham all the way for me. Ertz is droppable.
Oh yeah, for sure, 100%. It's revenge game.
The revenge game. Gotta love those, man. They usually work out for the better for us fantasy players. He says, yeah, different league. Good looks, man. Thanks for joining us again, too, by the way. Hopefully we helped out. Niall Davis, don't expect anything huge. Tyler Eifert, I think, is a must-start every week, but Kev's right. Matchups can change that tone there. What else here? What else? Jeff Donovan is saying stuff on Twitter. Nothing relevant, though. How is that game going, by the way? What's the update? It's in overtime, by the way. The first overtime game ever in London. And it's between the Redskins and the Bengals. It's actually been a really good game. So, good for them to finally get themselves a good game over there in London. Cincinnati, it seems like, has the ball right now. I'm unable to watch, unfortunately. But something happened. I just got a high alert on NFL.com. I don't know what that means.
Somebody said
it was for Chris Thompson, but I don't know what it meant. Looks like they're moving the ball. Gio Bernard with a 14-yard run. Chris
somebody's
Thompson.
down.
What's happening? Oh, they're playing highlights right now. Oh, nice overthrow.
Can't tell. Somebody's hurt.
Kirk Cousins. It says on the NFL.com it's Duke Ahenicho, a safety.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Yep, that's what it says. So any last-minute questions, guys? We only have 4 minutes left before Week 8. TN says, last week I woke up early to watch the London game but fell asleep at the boring Giants game. I don't know how they won. Yeah, last week's game was brutal. Any last-minute questions? Once again, guys, we'll get them answered for you. Kev, this week, do we have Harmon on this week or next week?
Next week. This week we have Ben Cummins from, he writes for just about everybody. 2-quarterback, RotoViz, fantasy footballers.
Yeah, so look forward to this week's episode of the Fantasy Authority podcast. We now launch on Thursday mornings, by the way. If you are an avid listener, you would have probably noticed that by now. But if you're not, used to launch on we've kind of pushed it back quite a few times, right? We used to be a Tuesday night, then we used to be Wednesday morning. Now we're Thursday morning. Just kind of changed up the show a little bit as more of a look forward to the coming week than a review of the previous week. It's a lot of fun. We do it live on Tuesday night if you want to watch the recording. That's a pretty cool thing to see. You can hear us banter with our guests. Last week it was Dynasty Frank. That would have been a great one to join us on. This week, Ben Cummings. I haven't talked to Ben myself, but I imagine he'll be an awesome guest. Looking forward to that. If you haven't listened to last week's show with Dynasty Frank, by the way, go ahead and give it a listen. Really good show. I don't know, Kev, did you re-listen to it? I thought it was a great show there with Frank. He's so good at making people laugh, just keeping the mood light. Good guy to have on the show.
That was excellent. Very, very, very entertaining.
We will 100% get Dynasty Frank on this game day show one day. Guarantee it. He showed a little bit of interest on Tuesday. We'll have to work on getting him. So, Kev, you dressing up for Halloween?
No, I am not dressing up for Halloween.
You're not dressing up for Halloween?
No. My son is, though. He's going to be a Ninja Turtle.
He's being a Ninja Turtle. Which one?
Leonardo.
So he's a leader then.
Yeah. Strong leader, just like his old man.
Strong leader, just like his old man. Listen to that. Gosh, your head doesn't fit on the screen, Kev.
I know.
I am dressing up. Actually, it's my first time owning a home. We live in a condo association, so we are expecting a ton of guests, a ton of children coming trick-or-treating. So I will be a farmer, which isn't very far off from uh, the area that I live in. It's very country-like, and farming is actually an occupation out here. So I don't know if I'm actually dressing up or just pretending to be a different occupation for a day. I guess it's the same thing. We have hay bales out on the front stoop and all that stuff. So it should be fun. Looking forward to it. I have never had a home with trick-or-treaters in my adult life, so I don't know what to expect. I have no idea if I have enough candy, so it should be an experience.
I think the other question too is, what are you? What kind of candy are you passing out? I mean, are you getting the good stuff, or what's going on with that?
Listen, we got the snack size, all right? I'm not made of money. I can't, but we got a huge variety of snack size. We got some M&Ms, some Snickers, got the Milky Way, the Three Musketeers. We even got Crunch Bars and Butterfingers. I mean, we went all out right here. Tons of good.
Oh, yeah, that's where it's at.
Right? I mean, the classics. You have to go with the classics there.
You know, a very underrated candy is Dots.
Dots.
I love some Dots.
They get stuck to my teeth. They're delicious. They taste awesome, but man, they are hard to get out of your teeth. You got to brush like 6 times afterwards.
I know that's right. They're so good.
They're delicious. That'll do it for the Game Day show today, guys. Best of luck in your fantasy leagues. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to ask you what you're being for Halloween, but let us know on Twitter. Reach out at FF_authority is the official fantasyauthority.com Twitter account. You can reach Kevin at FantasyWrath13. You can reach myself at the one and only PZ. It's the number one and only PZ. Reach out to us on Twitter. Use hashtag AskTFA. Let us know what you are being or what your children are being for Halloween. We really look forward to your responses. Have a great week 8 action. Best of luck to your fantasy teams. Best of luck to your NFL teams. And we will see you next weekend. Bye now.